And the reason I think it is because you'll find the same base of the sacred cubit fixed in these ancient systems. They work either in stadia or they work in nautical miles, and they work also in statute miles. And so what happened is that calibration of the inch was kept as close as possible to fitting how the sacred cubit would be fit into 25.20 inches. The reason for that is because that number is how the universe is connected, or through which the universe is connected. Even the number of days of creation fit that number 7 times 360. If your Earth revolves 7 times in 360 degrees, you end up with 2,520 degrees total. It's a statement of time. It's a statement of our how the Earth is actually situated in the solar system, the creation itself. Mm-hmm. So taking this idea again, once you have really clearly established this isn't something that you have to work, with trigonometry. You can actually go to Google Earth, and they have a ruler tool, and you can set it up to either statute miles or nautical miles or meters or what have you, and you can put your base point on the Temple Mount and extend it to where Babylon is. It's actually the center of Babylon. Actually, you can put it to the old ruins of Belshazzar's his actual throne room, and you can find that it's 539 statute miles, which is also in the date in B.C. that the temple fell. Now, what's actually happening then is you're anchoring to a place that's metaphorically a symbol of the Messiah. Mm-hmm. The Holy of Holies, the foundation stone, the temple itself. Jesus even used it metaphorically, as his body. Right. Saying, for this temple, in 3 days I'll raise it up again. So it's his word. He says the temple is a metaphor for him. So the calendar that we're stuck on right now is also anchored to him by the idea that the Christian era is in the year of our Lord from his birth. So now there's been 2,008 years, but not people quibble over where actually the birth occurred. The fact is that this is the calendar we've been using since Julian, the Julian calendar, and then changed from the Gregorian calendar. But we have this to date all of our events with relationship to Christ's birth, and in the modern times we're going to continue using it, and it's going to be used into the end times itself. And so, with your statement of you think that there is a higher force, a spiritual force that actually is involved with these sort of calibration systems, I believe it is even to this time. I think.
Well, even the disclosure of it, even the disclosure of it to mortals. What's interesting is you mentioned the end times, and what I was just thinking about is that the Antichrist, is one of his things that said he's going to do is to change the times and the seasons. And I wonder if, in fact, he might try to obfuscate or try to cover up some of this revealed information by actually corrupting this reading system. It certainly happened in our history. From what I understand in the work that Bishop Usher's done and others regarding the origins of the modern Jewish calendar, my understanding is back in, 100 A.D. when it was established, that the rabbi actually that oversaw the committee to establish it actually took huge numbers out of the reigns of the Persian kings, out of the time of Abraham and other people in the Bible, to artificially deduct something like 240 years. So in fact, they could get the 69 weeks of Daniel to line up with the anointment of Bar Kokhba as the Messiah, rather than Jesus, which actually fit there on Palm Sunday. So there has been a precedent that people would manipulate this measurement calendar system, and there's still a legacy of it in the Jewish calendar to try to pick a false Messiah. Do you think that could repeat itself again?
I think it's entirely possible. I think even with the idea of the metric system was almost part of this too, because it obfuscates these measurements that fit into prophecy, that fit into this idea that dimensionally the temple is the center of everything on the earth. If you're measuring in meters or kilometers, you don't see this. But if you're using statute mile, this Protestant Christian England was actually able to establish you see that the actual biblical prophetic power of placement of the temple is actually intact then.
Right. It's funny you mentioned meters, because I always picture the French as the ones who really pushed that, and I think it's a legacy of the French Revolution, where that
was a Jacobin.
Right.
Thing.
That was another legacy, sort of a foreshadowing of the time of the days of Antichrist, because they also changed the times and the seasons, changed our calendars, even changed the
names of the months
a daily clock into a decimal system. At the same time, they got rid of our gods and set up some kind of pagan goddess of liberty.
Tried to institute a very early project in eugenics.
So trying to get rid of a Christian concept of the Messiah, at the same time messing with our time, seems to be interconnected, David.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're using kilometers and you look at our solar system, for example, you won't see the prophetic numbers stand out. You take the moon, for example, you can find its diameter is 2,160 statute miles across. That's the sacred number, 2,520 minus 360. And then even, when it comes to its orbit, there's another function of a sacred number, which was fit into the sacred cubit, and the reason it was set into the sacred cubit was because of that very reason. It's the cubit, the word for the cubit, actually means mother. It's the mother of all measurements. It's the staple foundation for all measurement that God has actually calibrated the earth, time, and creation into. And I think Newton realized that. And when you look at this phenomena of the distance equals time from the temple itself, or the Temple Mount itself, you can see this fits perfectly into the calibration systems that we use.
Can you give us some more examples? You gave us the example from Babylon the Fall. There's a lot more than that in there in world history.
Oh, yes. There's an incredible amount. So you had that. That's the fall of Babylon. Great things happened to the Jews because they were taken from Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and they were placed in exile in where Iraq is now. But when Persia took over, Cyrus the Great released the Jews, and they were able to go back and build the temple again. So that was a very important, pivotal point in history for the Jews. And you look at another point where Persia itself falls to the Greeks, and the Hellenistic Empire takes over. That would have begun, the beginning of the end would have begun in 333 BC at the Battle of Issus, when Alexander routed Darius II. And that happened north of Israel, precisely 333 statute miles away from the Temple Mount. You can actually go and check out the route that Alexander took, the Battle of Issus. He actually was going south, trying to cut Darius off, and Darius actually had outflanked him. And at the point where Alexander turns around and meets him at the battle is exactly where 333 statute miles occurs from Temple Mount to that point north. You can go to one of the more contemporary dates, 1948, the rebirth of Israel. The last country that was in rulership over Palestine at the time was England, and London would be the capital. And then you can actually find the ancient Roman center of, they call it the square mile, above the plain, of where London is. And there's a stone that's still in existence. It's not exactly in the right place anymore. It's on Cannon Street. It's called the London Stone, the Roman mile marker for all the roads that were coming, kind of like a wagon wheel to ancient Londinium, when it was actually a Roman town. You can measure from that point to the Temple Mount, and you'll find it's 1,948, and this time nautical miles. And the really strange thing about that is I found in every case, if you're finding a date BC, it'll be in statute miles, and every date that's in AD is in nautical miles.
Do you know why?
Exactly sure why. I'm not exactly sure why, but it does actually clarify, in what part of the Gregorian calendar it occurs. There's also anomalies that you'll find too. Well, I'll go on with some more examples. In 1799, in the campaign against Egypt, Napoleon actually was moving into Palestine, and in 1799 he actually wrote a decree for the creation of a Jewish state. there in Israel. And he partly believed that he was fulfilling some of the prophecies of Daniel. And he believed he was the king that had come that would actually take over that portion of the country. And his decree was stated in Jews are free to come back to this land, and that when he actually conquered it, he was still fighting the Battle of Axe at the time against the Turks and the English allies. He would actually create a Jewish homeland, and that was in 1799 when he issued this decree. You can go to Paris, you can actually find the center island where the Church of Notre Dame is, and there's actually a center stone there, a modern one, and that was in ancient times the center of Paris. And you can extend a line to the Temple Mount, and it's 1,799 nautical miles. So
Wow.
You're actually finding these more contemporary dates here too. I found another one in Madrid, Spain, which I thought was strange. If you go right to the center of Madrid, Spain, you find 1943 or 1944, somewhere there. Madrid was one of the main hubs of the Underground Railroad for moving the Jews out of Poland and Germany and out of Europe, out of Western Europe. During the time of the Final Solution, it's like probably the nexus of that movement. It did more for the Jews to escape the Holocaust than any other city in Europe. And then you can go to Mecca, which I have to figure this out. I know that Islam is actually their calendar starts with the idea that when I think it's Muhammad left Mecca, is his journey away from Mecca, and I can't think of the actual date when they start, but I know it appears around 630 AD. Islam does. But that's not what I found when I measured the distance between the actual Kaaba stone in the Kaaba Mosque in Mecca, the holiest place for Islam, and then you go to Judaism's holiest site, the site of the Temple Mount, where the Holy of Holies was, and it's exactly 666 nautical miles. And if you extend that line a few feet farther than the center of the Kaaba stone, it's too far, and a few feet closer to Jerusalem, it's not far enough. It's absolutely perfect to the foot for 666 nautical miles. That's not the only place that you find that number show up. You find it in also where Daniel was taken in his vision of the end times. In Daniel 9, where he's in Babylon, but he says in his vision he goes to Susa, which is in Iran, and where to this day it's called Shush, where they say Daniel's tomb is, and he's standing on this canal. You can actually go on Google Earth and look and find ancient Susa in Iran, and you can find where the canal is, and you can find that it itself is 666 nautical miles away from Jerusalem. And this is one of those anomalies again, too, and I was thinking, well, why is this? He's on the Elahi, he's between the Elahi River, it splits right between the city, and you can find the canal that he's standing on, it's 666 nautical miles away, and you think, why would that number stand out? Well, if you notice that the latitude and longitude of Jerusalem itself, and I'll tell you what the latitude and longitude is. Latitude is 31 degrees, 46 minutes, and longitude is 35 east, 14 minutes. You add those two together, you'll get 66.6. And that stands out again, too. You're seeing the number repeat itself in units that talk about the end time itself, in units where you find the greatest opposers, I suppose, to the Jewish state, and especially Jerusalem as being the center for the religious Israel.